Hello everyone. Before we begin this podcast episode, it's Rue here with a quick update on the content after a fast-paced week in politics. On Monday the 13th of May, the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, announced that he and the government have listened to the outcry and will amend the Criminal Justice Bill's rough sleeper section to compel police and local authorities to support services before criminal sanctions can be used. References to odours in the bill will be removed, with an explanation that the original intention had been to tackle dumped rubbish or human waste rather than criminalising rough sleepers for being unable to wash. The government will also change part of its definition of nuisance rough sleeping from being capable of causing distress to require it to be specifically about damage to property or disruption of a business. While we are really pleased to hear about this change of heart from the government, we will be continuing to monitor the bill's progress, and the bill does not describe how the issue of increased rough sleeping, which is so sensitively explained by our podcast guests Jennifer and Father Dominic, will be addressed, if at all, by government. So with that update in mind, please enjoy the rest of the podcast. Welcome to 10 Minutes on Justice for Rough Sleepers. My name is Rue and I'm one of the Joint Public Issues team. With me today are two church leaders who organised an open letter protesting government plans in the Criminal Justice Bill to criminalise what is described as nuisance rough sleeping. We know homelessness, including rough sleeping, is a complex issue with no easy answers, but we do have opportunities to make a positive difference in people's lives. Father Dominic, we'll come to you first. Could you tell us a bit about yourself and how your church has been supporting rough sleepers?
Yeah, I'm the parish priest at City Centre Church in the West End. It's best known as Farm Street, Church of the Immaculate Conception. It's the Jesuit church in central London. I'm also the chair of Justice and Peace in the Diocese of Westminster. And we've been involved with rough sleeping really for as long as many people can remember, going back 50, 60 years. We've been on the streets bringing food and bringing clothes to the homeless, befriending them. And we've seen the rough sleeping issue get worse and worse. We've seen more and more on the streets going through the 1980s, the 1990s. Then it seemed to be being addressed. Right in the beginning of the pandemic, we were working in Trafalgar Square with those who were left on the streets, giving food, which was provided extremely generously from a number of hotels and restaurants. It was an incredible time. And sadly, now since the pandemic, the last 3 or 4 years, the number has gone up more and more. And so we have a homeless restaurant, which feeds about 200 people every week. We have outreach groups who go out on the streets 3 times a week. We see a lot of homeless in our local area. In fact, they are the group who use the church and its services most. So it's a sad situation, but it's a situation in which we believe that as Christians together, we can really be involved and try and make a difference.
Jennifer, could you tell us about your role and how the open letter from West End church leaders came about?
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name's Jennifer Mills-Knutsen, and I'm the senior minister at the American International Church. And we sit right on Tottenham Court Road. And like Father Dominic, we also have a soup kitchen that's open 6 days a week since the 80s. Our numbers have doubled in the 8 years that I've been there, from about 80 a day to now 160, 170, even sometimes closing in on 200 people every single day, 6 days a week. In addition to that, we participate in the Camden Winter Night Shelter with 13 other churches throughout the course of the season. But right on Tottenham Court Road, I began to notice a sharp increase, not just in people sleeping overnight, but in people sort of setting up their own homes out on the road. Right next to the church, there is an encampment of about half a dozen tents with furniture and a full move-in of people sleeping outdoors, as well as in the park, and up and down between us and University College London Hospital, full-on mattresses And the business owners were getting agitated at this, but also people passing by the church were walking by and saying, why is nobody doing anything about this? Why is the church doing nothing? And I'm thinking, we're doing everything we can, but the issue is far bigger than we as churches and charities can handle on our own. This is far beyond the scale of what the charity sector can deal with, and it requires a government level solution. So I brought this to our monthly breakfast meeting of clergy in the West End of London, sort of Soho and a little bit bigger, all of whom are working with people who are in poor and vulnerable situations and rough sleeping, and talked about what we needed to do to sort of raise this issue above ourselves. And so the decision was made in that meeting that we would write this open letter to our two MPs in Westminster and Camden, who are Nikki Aiken and Sir Keir Starmer. And so we, for the first time, actually, in my understanding, decided to act together with a bit of a political voice as a group.
What kind of response has there been to the letter so far?
Yeah, we got an immediate response within 30 minutes from Nikki Aiken. And Nikki has been extremely helpful during her time as MP, and before that also as leader of Westminster City Council, really wanting to commit herself to eradicating rough sleeping, and was quite influential also in bringing the possibility of having the Vagrancy Act of 1824 repealed. This cynical move of criminalised homelessness through a replacement to the Vagrancy Act, she's committed to stopping that. And so we got a reply straight away, and she's token supported. We also received a reply from Sir Keir Starmer, who also wanted to show his support to us and to do all that he could within his power to bring about change.
It's been picked up by several local media outlets as well. So the word is getting out that this is happening. And in our area, in Fitzrovia, there is some movement to get a meeting together with law enforcement and the Business Improvement District and local businesses and us to try to think about our neighborhood particularly and how we can respond together in ways that are more compassionate.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really good news to hear. There is a high concentration of rough sleeping in London and the South East, nearly half of all rough sleeping according to government statistics. But listeners will understand that rough sleeping occurs throughout the UK, with an estimated total of about 3,900 individuals as of autumn 2023. Crisis, which is a national UK charity for people experiencing homelessness, has been very active on this issue. Like you're saying, getting into the media, high-profile media, social media, and also a letter-writing campaign to MPs. In a recent update, Crisis has shared that 10,000 people have written letters to their MP calling for the rough sleeping section of the Criminal Justice Bill to be amended or withdrawn. They've also suggested that because of the outcry, the government might well back down on their plans. So there seems to be some movement on this. It's brilliant to hear. However, the Vagrancy Act of 1824, that's 200 years ago, which our MPs voted to repeal in 2022, is still technically in force. So the government will be looking for something else to replace it, which is why we are still urging listeners to contact your MP now and explain to them why you believe rough sleepers should be treated better and what you would like the government to do about it. So if I ask Jennifer first and then Dominic, from your experience of supporting rough sleepers, what could the government do to make a positive difference?
To quote one of the things that was in the response that we received from Keir Starmer is that homelessness is a political choice. And there have been political decisions made that have led to this crisis. The first one is quite recent and quite immediate, and we've seen an impact on the ground, which is that as the government has tried to hasten the processing of asylum applications from people who are seeking status here in the UK, they have shortened the length of time people have to get out of government-supported housing. So people who have waited 4, 5, 10 years for their asylum claim to be heard finally receive approval that they can stay here legally in the UK, and then they are given 7 days to vacate government housing. They have not been able to work prior to this. They've not had any legal status, and it is completely unreasonable to let people out in 7 days. The old rule was 28 days, which was already far too short. But just in the last year, it's been shortened to 7 days. And we're seeing people immediately finding themselves homeless and rough sleeping because of this government decision.
This is a really cynical new policy, which is bringing more and more people onto the streets and people who have nowhere to go. And I'm sure this is the case across the city and across the country. People whom we encounter, they often come to the churches last. Last because they've tried elsewhere. They tried local authorities. And homeless agencies have been very, very helpful as well. And we work very closely with them. They've often, though, come from situations of broken relationships, broken families, and the immigration laws at the moment. I'd add also about healthcare workers as well, and families being split up because dependents not being around to join immigrant workers in the healthcare sector. That actually drives people to desperation, and they land up on our doorsteps. And we encounter them as not numbers, as not a problem. A political issue it is, yes, indeed, as Sir Keir Starmer says, and it's also about real people. And I think that the two MPs we've been dealing with really get that. And we want to work with them closely because we know the ladies and the gentlemen on the streets, more and more ladies as well, incidentally. It's another issue. And we want to deal with them as people and to help them as best we can.
Thank you. It's really important that our government recognises that faith communities are really vital in this work. And actually, churches in particular are wonderful places for building community. And actually, that's something uniquely that churches and other faith groups will be able to offer. And wouldn't it be wonderful if the government recognised that? Actually gave the right kind of funding so that these kind of things could happen. But actually to enable churches and other faith groups to build community, lasting community. Perhaps people who would really benefit from that. It's not a quick fix solution, but it's certainly one thing that churches can maybe offer. JPIT has for some time been offering resources from Housing Justice, which is a Christian charity working to address all kinds of homelessness, and helps churches and other groups to run night shelters for rough sleepers. So are there any other organisations that could support our listeners who want to do something to help rough sleepers? Or how could congregations even get started?
Well, in terms of volunteering, and we're always looking for volunteers at Farm Street. We're a consortium of different churches. We're called Central London Catholic Churches, but it's not just Catholic churches. It's open to anyone. And indeed, there are plenty of other places where people can volunteer.
Even if you're in a more rural context or you're not encountering rough sleepers every day, then you can recognize that this is a nationwide issue about a lack of affordable housing and a lack of supportive services, whether that's youth services or mental health services or addiction services or just comprehensive case management services, and become involved at the local level on preventing homelessness in your area and working with people who are living on the margin. And also, writing to your own MP and raising these concerns about the ways in which these political decisions are having an impact on real people and their real ability to simply survive.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. As we've already said, homelessness is a complex issue. There are no easy answers, but we do have opportunities to make a positive difference in people's lives. I hope each of our listeners feels more empowered now to do something to help, starting with contacting your MP. You can find links to help you in the podcast show notes. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Dominic, for talking with us today, especially Dominic, sitting in a railway waiting room somewhere. Thank you for fitting us into your day. Thank you for all that your congregations are doing to support people who are rough sleeping as well. It is noticed and it's valued and treasured. And thank you for what you're doing. For more from the Joint Public Issues team, please visit jpit.uk. That's jpit.uk. If you've appreciated listening, please share this podcast with your friends. Goodbye to Jennifer.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, Father Dominic.
Thank you very much.
And it's goodbye from me. Take care.